us from far and wide. My name's Amy Schiffman. I am President and CEO at Evolve Giving Group. Jamie, you want to say hello?
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Jamie Klobuchar, Evolve Giving Group. I'm the Executive Vice President. We are so excited that you're here with us today to talk about how to do gift solicitations on Zoom.
Yes, we are. I'm going to share my screen with you all, and you should feel free to move things around, move your screen around if you want our faces bigger, smaller, whatever works for you. We're very excited about this topic because it is really coming up daily in our work with our clients. And we're pleased that you want to join us for this conversation. I think what's exciting about this topic is this is something we're sort of figuring out as we go along. And so what Jamie and I want to bring to you today is an opportunity for us to share our experiences with you. And we're even going to put it all on the line for you and do a couple of role plays with each other, practicing the work that we now must do via Zoom instead of in person. And we're going to talk a lot about the hows and whys and whens in a minute. First, really sort of less than 2 minutes on who we are and what we do and why we're happy you're joining us. Evolve Giving Group was formed very recently in June of 2020. Really, it's an outgrowth of the work that many of us were doing together for many years at Giving Tree Associates. We're excited about the fact that we are a women-founded and led nonprofit consulting firm. We spend a lot of time with clients throughout North America and even internationally. We like saying that about our one Israel-based client right now, which makes us international. We are really excited about capacity building, about growth, about working with our clients to ensure long-term sustainability. And I think long-term sustainability has never been as relevant as it is right now when we're all sort of figuring out how to function in a global pandemic. The work that we do tends to focus in these 5 areas. We spend a lot of time talking about campaign development, how we strengthen fundraising programs, annual capital endowment. We do a lot of work with organizations, small and large, and in the middle, on strategic planning and sort of thinking about that roadmap for the future. Again, now maybe relevant more than ever is thinking about what the next 12 to 24 months looks like for your organization. We spend a lot of time talking about and with the board of directors and helping both board and professional leadership be as strong and healthy and professionalized as it can be. And so we're talking about the intersection between governance and fundraising all of the time. We spend a lot of time looking for talent and finding talent for nonprofits in the field: executive director, chief executive officer, director of development, chief marketing officer type operations searches. So that's something that a portion of our team spends a lot of time thinking about. And last, we do a lot of coaching and training. That can be sort of a long-term relationship with a professional or a board member who's looking to work on a particular topic or issue, or just work toward general professional development, or it might be coaching and training a team or a board or sort of a one-off engagement. That's what we do here at Evolve, and we're really excited about the work, and we're excited that a lot of our client partners are here with us today engaging on this topic. So speaking of today, what are we going to try and fit into this hour? We are an ambitious bunch. And so what we're looking to do is to talk about what has changed with regard to soliciting major gifts, what has not changed with regard to soliciting major gifts. We want to walk you through what might be a review for many of us, sort of the basic building blocks or the components of a good ask, and talk about how that changes or what happens when that ask happens via Zoom? What kind of preparations do we need to make both before the meeting or for anything that might happen during the meeting? And Jamie's going to sort of take us through some thoughts about the wise use of technology. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to finish before we allow you to ask questions, and we'll try, even in this big group environment, to allow you to have your voice heard and share some of your experiences with your peers. But Jamie and I are going to do a little bit of role playing both on the appointment making front, because the questions that we got from you prior to the session, and thank you for submitting those, have a lot to do with how we get to the Zoom meeting, the Zoom solicitation, and not just what happens during that Zoom solicitation. So we're going to try one role play that is all about getting the meeting, and the second is the actual solicitation. And we will try and give each other a little bit of a hard time so that you won't accuse us of going easy on the other person, but we want to give you some sense of what we have both experienced as major gift officers, and how that looks. Okay, we good? We in this? Let's just talk first about what has changed, and I'm going to throw this to Jamie to take us through some of that research.
Great, thanks, Amy. So we've because we want to make sure that we serve our clients well, we really try to do our best to keep on top of trends. And so we do that through by a couple of ways. We spend a lot of time talking to our clients, we talk to ourselves, and we read a lot, and we try to kind of dissect the information that we get and apply it to our clients. So there were two studies that I found really, really interesting. One was done by the Lilly School of Philanthropy. The other was done by Fidelity. And they were both surveys. I think the Lilly School was about 1,800, and I think the one with Fidelity was a little less than 1,000. And Fidelity actually polled donors who give $1,000 or more annually. So it was really interesting what they saw. So at the end of April, we saw 63% of all nonprofits saw a decrease in giving. And I should kind of put a little asterisk next to that. Not all nonprofits saw that, because it wasn't falling equally across all charities. What was being more affected at that time were education, arts, and environment were the ones seeing a decrease. Hospitals, who were at the forefront of taking care of people with COVID, a lot of them saw steady giving. Some of them actually saw increased giving. We talked to one of our partners early on at Northwestern Memorial Foundation here in Chicago, and they were actually seeing flat, if not increased giving. So it was really, really interesting to see that it wasn't, equal across all different sectors. Also, what we're seeing is that people's interest right now in health and human services continues to kind of dominate, and local giving has really been a focal point for many, many people. We have seen that with our clients as well. When they've been reaching out to their donors, they're hearing that people want to give locally. They want to make sure that the families in their communities are getting the support they need to kind of get through these difficult times. One of the things that we didn't like to see was that 21.4% of donors plan to decrease their giving to what I just said, education, arts, and the environment. And that has been reflected in some of the anecdotal conversations that I've been having with my clients. I do not think that's a reason to despair. I think it gives you, for those of you who are with us today from any organizations within that sector, I think the challenge I put out to you is really, how do you update your messaging and change your case to stay relevant? So we can talk a little bit more about that in the question and answer. We are still seeing across the board that there are concerns over the economy, even now that we're past the presidential election. All of us who've been in fundraising a long time and have been through other presidential election years, we know that sometimes donations slow down around this time, like people aren't focused. But what we're seeing now is that even with the election, people are still concerned about the economy. It'll be interesting to see where that goes as we head into year-end giving, but it's something to be mindful of. But the great news is that we are seeing still many people who plan to maintain or increase their giving. The fact that almost 80% of people said this within the Fidelity study is hopeful to me. I have been, seeing with our clients that a lot of folks are starting to open their wallets and feel a little bit more comfortable, but it'll be interesting to see how things play out as we move into year end. And one thing that I found particularly interesting is that people aren't throwing their money toward COVID-19 effort, like combat efforts. And part of the reason they're not is they're a little confused at how their gift can make an impact. It's not that they don't want to support it, but they really want to understand if they're putting money behind something related to treating COVID, that they want to understand how their money's being spent. So if anyone here on the call today is from a university or an academic medical center where you're doing research, you've got some studies going on around this topic, I think that's really interesting. And that's another challenge to you to think about, what does your case for support look like? So Amy, do you want to talk about what stayed the same? Because there's a lot of stuff I think that stayed the same.
I would agree. And I think it's easy to get to feel panicked and nervous about the fact that so much has changed. But if we take a deep breath and look at what do we know works, and what are the core building blocks of a good major gifts program, that at least puts me a bit at ease to say, no, I do know how to do this. We do know what a good major gift prospect looks like. And so this part might be review for you, but I think it's important to just remember that when we're talking about a good major gift prospect, that hasn't changed during the COVID period. I think what might have even happened is that these key donor characteristics become more pronounced during a time of crisis. Who's coming forward, who's showing their interest. And so we always talk about the ABCs of a good major gift prospect, and that all three really need to be true, not just one or two, in order to make it to the top of my major gift prospect list. Someone who I believe is ready for the ask. And that's what we talk a lot about here, is that donor readiness. If we feel, or if we know that someone is ready because we've done a lot of good cultivation, we've taken many, we talk about moves management and the touch points that are involved in turning a non-donor into a donor, or the stewardship process, the process by which we keep donors giving and engender donor loyalty. I know that I'm a more confident solicitor when I know those touch points have been made, when there is constant communication and contact with the donor. I feel more comfortable with the ask. I feel ready for the ask, and the donor feels more comfortable because they've gotten their questions answered and we've established a relationship. It makes both of us feel more comfortable, and it results in a more successful ask. So what do we need to know? These three things need to be true: ability, belief, connection, ABC. So the ability to make a meaningful gift. Does this person make a major gift elsewhere? Have we done any research about what their typical annual giving looks like? Belief in the mission. How do we know that? Have we had conversations with this person about their philanthropic priorities? Is this an area that is important to them? And then C, connection within the organization. So just because someone has wealth or has access to wealth, and just because they believe in, let's say, higher education, doesn't mean they're connected to our school, doesn't mean that there's a natural connection. So if A and B are true, but C is not, they may not make it to the top of your major gift prospect list. All three should be true, ideally, in order for that person to be considered a qualified prospect. We have to establish that connection. So whether that's you or someone on your board who works to do that, when I know that all three things are true, I'm a more comfortable solicitor, and they are more comfortable with the process. Another thing that has not changed is the reasons that people give. There are lots of them, and we have to tap into what that reason is for the donor or the prospect on your list. The number one and number two reasons have not changed. They give because they're asked to give. So it's our job to offer that opportunity, offer that person a partnership, an opportunity to invest in the work that we're doing together, because without that ask, they may go on giving at a level that is lower than what they're capable of. And certainly belief in the mission or project. again, when we think about what needs to be true, A, B, and C, and then we have to give them the opportunity to make that ask. So if we keep coming up with reasons why they shouldn't be asked, they'll never make that gift. And a lot of the challenge in major gift work is not that we get a lot of no's. It's that we're not doing enough asking. We're not putting ourselves out there. We're not establishing ourselves as relationship builders so that the gift comes. That's the natural outcome of solid relationship building. So again, keep in mind that if all these things are true, if we've established that relationship, or if there's a relationship manager within the organization, and we've given this person the information they need to take these steps to become more engaged and involved in our organization, the solicitation becomes the natural next step. Okay, so how do we, let's say that we have qualified the donor. Let's say we've done a very good job cultivating that new relationship or stewarding that current relationship. How do we get to the point of the Zoom? This is the first major roadblock that you will encounter, both with yourself, right? It's hard. This is the hardest part, because once you get the appointment and the person knows why you're there, face to face on Zoom to have a conversation, you're 80% of the way there. So we know that once you get in front of that person, you've got an 80% chance of walking away with a pledge, or if you were in person, maybe even a check. But getting the appointment is the hard part. And that's why we want to spend some time in one of our role plays building that out with you. So what I would say is call your best prospects first. If you're nervous about getting this going and asking people for the appointment, and by the way, we're focused on Zoom solicitation. It does not mean you necessarily have to have a Zoom meeting to get the appointment. It may be that you just pick up the phone, and that's what Jamie and I really recommend, is that you pick up the phone and you ask for that appointment. And that we prefer that you not do it via email if you don't have to, because it's easier to shut down that conversation via email than it is via phone call. And we don't love texting about the appointment either. We know that some of you have relationships with the people on your list, and it might feel like you have a casual enough relationship to make that appointment via text or email. We prefer you don't, because again, it's very easy to say on text or email, let me get back to you. Let me think about my schedule and get back to you. Doesn't have it happen as often when I have them on the phone, because I'm in a position to direct the conversation. That's why. So
yeah, can I jump in quick?
Yes, please.
I will say that one thing that my one note on that is I find that texting confirmations once you have the appointment is a really good way to like just solidify things. But absolutely, I agree with you, Amy, that phone is best still.
Yeah. We want you to call the people first that you think are going to say yes to the Zoom, because if you call the people you know the least well on that list and you're not successful, it's hard for you to get to the third opportunity. You'll feel shut down. That early success gives you the confidence to move on. So again, I would pick the person on the list first that you feel might be easiest to get the appointment with. I also think that while we're not huge believers in scripting, I think knowing in advance what you're going to say is helpful. That might seem obvious, but put those talking points in front of you. Just if you're someone who gets nervous with that phone conversation, give yourself the information right at your fingertips that you need in order to be able to move that conversation along. Don't be afraid to start the conversation, and we'll say this again about the solicitation, by establishing rapport. You don't have to be all business from the very second you get this person on the phone. It's okay to do a little bit of schmoozing and to establish these common bonds or reestablish these common bonds. We want you to ask the person how they are. We want, especially with what's going on right now, we want you to be sensitive. And it may also give you some clues as to whether or not this is the appropriate time to solicit this gift and the appropriate amount to ask for is this initial conversation. So be sure that you're listening. I want you think about saying something that creates interest, but doesn't push you to solicit right then and then there over the phone. We want you to get face to face. We want you to get Zoom to Zoom with this person. And we're going to talk about why that's important in a few minutes. Don't accidentally solicit over the phone. So I might say something like, there have been, and one of the role plays that we're going to do is using a independent school as an example. So I might say something like, there are so many amazing things happening at the school right now. The opportunity to use remote and virtual learning and technology in ways we've never done before. I would love to share that with you. If we can schedule a Zoom appointment, it would be great to see your face and be able to have this conversation as close to in person as possible. So I want to create some interest in what I'm going to say. I also do want to let them know that I'd like to talk about this year's gift. I'm not pretending that that's not the objective of the conversation. No one wants to be taken by surprise. So I would say I'd like the opportunity to share with you what's going on, to thank you for your past support, and to talk about this year's campaign, or to talk about your commitment to this year's campaign. So think about that language in advance and just have it sitting in front of you so you have it as a go-to. At the end of the day, the purpose of the phone call is to get that appointment. And so what we want you to do, although we want you to create interest, is to move that conversation along and not spend too much time. If that person says, well, you can just tell me right now, I have 4 minutes before my next meeting, we don't want it rushed. So I think you've got to pull that back and take control of the conversation and say, I would love an opportunity when we're both prepared and we have a little bit of time to sit down and talk. I'm really interested in hearing why you've been a supporter of the organization or organizations like this for many, many years. It would be fantastic to be able to schedule a Zoom with you. Are you available on Tuesday at 2:00, or are evenings better for you? Because if so, Friday at 5 might work for me. I'm always throwing out 2 or 3 options when I'm making an appointment. It's hard to say no to 2 or 3 options. It is easy to say no to one option. So have your calendar in front of you and be prepared to offer lots of different opportunities to meet with this person, whether that's end of the workday, beginning of the workday. Maybe it's right smack in the middle of the day, someone's lunch hour. If you can be flexible and have lots of options, it's hard to say I'm never available. And we also say negotiate the format. Be sure when you're making the appointment that someone has used Zoom before. We're going to get into a little bit about that later, because if they haven't and they are not comfortable with whatever video format you used, it might be something that you have to direct them to download. And you might want someone to do a little bit of training with them prior to that meeting. And we'll get into that again in a couple of minutes. But be sure you establish any past obstacles or opportunities that this person has had to use whatever video format you're using for your call. Okay. That is appointment making. And we can spend the whole session just talking about appointment making, but we do want to get you to eventually to our role play. I want to run through the basic components of an ask. And again, this comes into the category of what has not changed. We still want you to, once you've established that opportunity to have that conversation. And by the way, make sure when you're making the appointment, you know how much time you have. So are you scheduling for an hour, or are they giving you 15 minutes? Because the call will go, or the Zoom will go very differently depending on how much time you have available. If I know I have an hour with this person, I might decide to use a video. I might show them photos from the organization. I might share a PowerPoint. If I know that they have 15 minutes to give to me, I'm going to sort of rethink about using 7 of those 15 minutes for my video. So that's something that you'll want to establish in advance. Let's say we have about 30 minutes, that's what you've established. The way that this Zoom will go is not so dissimilar from the appointment making, in that we want you to spend the first couple of minutes building rapport with the other person. So again, whatever you have in common, generally we are calling people or we are Zooming with people with whom we have a prior relationship. If you don't have a prior relationship and you've never met this person before, then I'm going to suggest that you're not ready to solicit. That you're likely not ready to solicit. You haven't built the relationship. So if that's what you're nervous about, I would suggest that you spend some time cultivating the relationship or stewarding the relationship before you ask this person for a major gift. Sometimes that's not possible. Most of the time it is possible, and we just don't fit that in to have an opportunity to learn more about what's motivating the donor. We're going to assume for the purposes of this call that you have built some sort of a relationship, even if it's a peripheral relationship. So once we're there, again, build that rapport. We don't want to be stiff. We don't want to be reading from a script. We want an opportunity to talk about what's going on in the world, because there's a lot going on in the world. At some point, you're going to put your organizational hat back on and remind them about the purpose of this call. And it seems obvious to say to be enthusiastic, but both when we're making appointments and sometimes when we're soliciting, I hear people doing a lot of apologizing. I'm so sorry, when we get them on the phone to make that appointment, I'm so sorry to bother you. The more enthusiastic you can be, if you start apologizing for taking up their time, it gives them an opportunity to deprioritize the work in your organization and the phone call or the Zoom with you. So being enthusiastic about the work that you're doing and giving them a sense of your passion, your commitment, your excitement about this work, that's contagious. So again, you never want to never want to hear the words "I'm sorry" or "I apologize," unless you're talking about that person's situation. But you're not apologizing for sharing information about an organization that's really meaningful to you. So keep that in mind and talk about how excited you are to be a part of the work that's going on, because it's so important right now. Once we complete that opening, we're moving to the presentation of the case for support. And that's where you're going to sort of tell your story. That, again, I want this information next to you. Maybe during a presentation of your case, you are showing a 2-minute video. Maybe you're showing some photographs. Maybe you're taking someone through a PowerPoint presentation that you have. Be sure, again, that it is conversational. I wouldn't take up the whole time with a video. So just be sure to divide that time and the percentage of the time that you're planning to spend on showing and then having that conversation. So I want to present that case for support, talk about what the organization is experiencing, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities, and then connect the campaign to those opportunities and to those challenges. So how does the campaign and eventually their gift allow you to confront those challenges? That's what you're doing during the second part of this conversation. And then you want to allow that person, before you ask for the gift, to give you some feedback and to ask questions. That is the biggest opportunity for learning during the whole call, is you present that case for support and then you invite their reactions. Oftentimes we learn something new at that very moment, like, oh, my mother really enjoyed that artwork or that program or whatever it is. You'll gather some information, or yes, that really bothered me about how the organization confronted that challenge. Whether it's positive or negative or just something you're learning about their own giving, now's the time to really listen and learn. And oftentimes I'll use that information during the ask. I might pivot right then and there and decide that I'm asking for a little bit more money. Or maybe I'm hearing that this person is having a hard time financially or professionally, and I've decided that maybe it's not a good time for the ask, or that I'm going to ask for less. So always I'm readjusting my thinking. The third part of this is the summarization of that conversation. So again, I just review, here's what we talked about, here's the role that I'm playing. If you're a volunteer, you're a board member soliciting, you've got to be talking about during that opening your passion and the role that you have played in the organization. I want you to bring that back in the summary. Why do you spend that time volunteering, whether you're a professional or a volunteer? Why is this important to you? What's the case for support here? And why are you asking them to make a gift at this time? And then you ask them for the gift, which is, again, none of this, what you're hearing from me right now, is any different than what I would be suggesting you do during a face-to-face ask. It's just that we're paying a lot of attention, and Jamie's going to cover this in a minute. We're paying a lot of attention to facial expressions, to body language. We can't see the whole body. But I'm using my hands as I talk, right? So you get a sense of how that person thinks and feels, which is why this type of solicitation is so much better than the phone call, is that you have an opportunity to look at that person, not directly in the eye, but see their eyes, their face, and their at least their upper body language. When I ask for a gift, I always use a consider statement. Would you consider a gift of? And I always ask for a specific amount. I never just ask someone to renew their support. I always ask for, and these days we need to be asking most of us for an increase. We're not budgeting for flat giving, most of us. And so if we have done our homework and we know this person is passionate about our cause, and we know this person has not suffered a major economic downturn in terms of their own finances, then you may be wanting to ask for an increase. So I would use the words, I've shared that case for our case for support with you and what we're trying to achieve. We really hope you'll partner with us in confronting these challenges. Would you consider an increased gift of $5,000 for this year's campaign? After I ask for that amount and I use that consider statement, I'm never the next person to talk. I want that person to have an opportunity to do what I just asked them to do, which is to think about it and consider the amount. At that point, I listen, I answer questions. Sometimes I'm doing a little bit of negotiation. And sometimes I'm responding to objections. I'm understanding what the challenges are. At some point, you'll either close that gift, you'll agree on an amount, or you'll make a plan for follow up. But either way, you just want to establish next steps with that donor and let them know what's going to happen next. If they're not sure and they want to confer with their spouse or their partner, you'll want to make an appointment to follow up. You want to ask them if Tuesday is enough time for them to have that conversation. And would it be okay if we jumped back on Zoom? And I prefer you jump back on Zoom than a phone call next Tuesday or next Friday. So make a very, very specific plan for follow up. Jamie, do you want to touch on what we need to keep in mind because we're using technology and we're not face to face?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the biggest things you have to remember is that everyone has different capabilities when it comes to technology. And I think in this day and age, because of the fact that we're in a pandemic and there are different restrictions in every community right now, and different comfort levels that people have with getting together in person, I think it's really okay when you're setting the appointment to ask what their capabilities are. It's really been I think it's really okay just to be really straightforward about it. I also think that you have to think creatively here. And I'll give you an example that I was sharing with Amy a couple of days ago. One of my mother-in-law does a lot of charitable work, and she's 83 and she is dying to meet with her development people. And one of the development people at the Leukemia Lymphoma Society said, I want to facilitate a video call with you and this scientist that she loves and is supporting and who no longer lives in Chicago. He moved to Nashville to work at Vanderbilt. And she said, I don't have Zoom. I have an iPad and I don't know what to do with it. LLS actually sent a technology person to her apartment in his mask to set her up for Zoom. And now that she has Zoom, she is so happy. She Zooms with everyone. And she doesn't know this, but I actually know the development officer. So I gave her a call and I said, okay, so tell me how this all happened. How did you do this? And she's like, well, I have this nice young man who does tech support for us here in the office. And I just asked him if he could go over to her house, and he charged me $75 to do it. But she's like, if you think about, I have a budget. I take taxis to meet donors usually. I have lunches with donors. She said, so for me to spend this little bit of money to set her up with her technology, she's like, it's still less expensive than the taxis and the lunch I would normally be doing. She said, and she's like, she was so grateful to have that connection during this time. She said she told me she was going to increase her gift. So for me, that was my aha moment, right? Because we're so used to working in a very different situation that we have to think a little bit creatively. So in preparing for us today, and I know so many of you on the phone are in organizations where you don't have in-house tech support or even tech support that is, kind of regularly, like on a retainer with you. But if you want to think about doing something like this, Geek Squad actually has this capability to either remotely dial in to help someone set up or to, mask up and go to houses. And it ranges for a call anywhere from $39.99 to up to $100, depending on what they actually need to do. And they said they've actually been getting a ton of calls, not from fundraisers, but from people who are trying to communicate with their parents or their grandparents, and they need someone to get on site to do that. So I want to make sure that all of you think about that and don't get stuck in your head about, oh my gosh, that seems expensive. Because once, you know, my pal said, look, I'm not taking taxis everywhere. I'm like, yeah, that's a really good point. So think about what you were spending before. This is a better way to spend it right now.
And if you have to spend $100 to get a $5,000 gift, it's still a pretty good return on your investment, right?
Absolutely. And the goodwill that came from this was immense. Like, I think as if she wasn't a loyal donor already, this just little tiny step was such a huge emotional connection for my mother-in-law. Apparently now the guy's coming over and doing other tech work for her, I found. So now she has a new friend. The other thing that I want to say here is that, Amy talked a little bit about this, but communicate your intentions in advance of the call, right? When you're setting the appointment, you don't want your donor to be thinking they're getting on the phone or the Zoom with you and be taken by surprise. Another really important thing that we don't think a lot about is if we're inviting a donor and their spouse or their family to come to a solicitation in person, we always know in advance how many people are going to be there. I mean, every once in a while over my career, I've been surprised and somebody's popped into a visit and I'm like, oh, hello. But I think it's so much more important when you are doing stuff on video to know who's going to be on the call. And also, not just on the call, like, are they going to, is it going to be me sitting here and Amy sitting here? Or is it going to be me on this video screen and Amy on this video screen? Because how you prepare, that matters, right? And I think if you don't know, ask. I think this is a time where we have to ask a lot more questions. And because it's not fun, as development officers, we get surprised enough in these situations. So I always like to say that when I'm planning, I want to take away as many surprises as I can. And so when you're setting up the appointment, I think it's really important that you know who you think you want to be at that meeting with you, but also ask them, is there anyone else that helps you make decisions that you want to join us that day? And really just get it out there. And then make sure that you get that person's contact information so you can send them any sort of technology link. And as I was saying before, if you're going to email or text a confirmation, it's easier if you have that person's contact information and you can just be in touch with them directly. Planning. I'm obsessive with planning for solicitations. I think somebody asked me early on when I transitioned from fundraising to consulting, like how long it takes me to plan for a solicitation. And I kind of went back and thought about it. Typically, it takes me 4 to 6 hours per solicitation. And that's usually when I'm doing a solicitation. The lower end is when I'm doing a solicitation alone. The higher end is when I'm partnering with a volunteer, which is always my preference. And test your technology, right? I'm gonna say this, and we're having some technological issues on the back end right now that no one knows about, because Amy and I, when we're presenting, we always have a backup plan. We have 2 people, behind us, not on screen, that are prepared to step in for us. We have someone who is monitoring the technology for us, and we practice and we practice. And I just can't emphasize. So as much work as you have to put into your presentation, your case for support, your talking points, all of that, understand what you need to do on the technological end and practice. And then prepare for things to go wrong. Amy texted me 3 minutes before the session and said, my internet just went out, but my hotspot is working. So when I did a webinar many months ago, I think it was my first webinar, what happened, my daughter was homesick with the flu and set off the fire alarm making toast. So the poor participants in the background had this noise, but I had a backup plan and I switched to my co-presenter. Those are the things you need to count on. You need to count on the fact that there's going to be distractions. We've done webinars where we see children, animals, delivery workers. You just have to know that this is the new reality. And as much as you can do to control your environment, you cannot control the environment of the people that you're speaking to. And you just need to take a deep breath and go with it. Can you go to the next slide, Aim?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. You just have to move on. I mean, we're getting so used to seeing somebody opening the door in the background, whatever it is. You need not pause. You just move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Also, there's just a bunch of other considerations that I wanted to share with you. Is a lot of people have been asking, do you share information in advance? And I think that depends. I think you need to decide in advance, are you going to have a couple slides on the screen and share a video like Amy was talking about? Or are you going to actually send hard copies or printed materials to your donor? And I think this goes back to knowing your donor and to listening, is how do they receive information well? Do they prefer to have time to read things? Do they like to see things in print? And you have to build that into your planning process. If you know they like to see things in print and you're going to have to messenger or deliver something, you need to plan for that and give yourself the time that you need. Also, I think with video, you can create unique experiences. We've relied so much as development officers over the years about doing so much in person. I think when you have the ability to use Zoom, you can bring other people into the solicitation in some cases where you haven't been able to do that before. I mean, I used the example earlier on about my mother-in-law connecting with the scientist that she loved. When he moved 3 years ago, she had no expectation of seeing him because it didn't even occur to her that they would do, a call on video. And here they were doing a call on video, and it worked really, really well. So think about how you can do that. Can you involve your program officers? Can you create site visits through videos? I mean, there's so many neat things that you can do. It puts a lot of pressure on you as a development officer to do that. But I think if we go back to remembering creating the donor experience and remembering what connects them emotionally to your cause, I think if you can sit down with your team and really kind of flesh out some ideas around that, you'll be amazed at what you can come up with.
Jamie, I want to also point out, just in terms of creating unique experience, we have some clients that have asked donors to engage in a Zoom solicitation over lunch, and they've sent lunch to their home or their office.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's like, if you really want to just create a more casual atmosphere, we can all be eating and drinking while we're talking. And there is something that sort of takes the tone down a little bit and makes us all more relaxed when we're engaging in a meal together. So that's a very easy thing to do. And it's a very nice thing to do. Again, we're soliciting major gifts. We're going to invest a little bit of time and money in doing it well.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. I love that. Also, building rapport, Amy talked a little bit about this. I think building rapport on Zoom is very deliberate, right? And the way I always remember this is my early major gifts training. And my friend Alicia, I think, is on, and she was part of this training as well. Listening and asking questions, always go back to that. Like, people love to talk about themselves. And I think if you remember that at the core, what are the questions you want to ask? What are the connections you want to build? It has to be deliberate. You have to think in advance. When you get on video, sometimes it's a weird, awkward silence. I think if you're prepared and you know what you want to ask, it takes the tone down right away, and people really, relax and lean in. Listening, it's really important to listen. I mean, I think listening is the most important part of major gifts work. And I think listening is even more important when you're on a screen, especially if you're in a video where there are several people involved. It can be really harder. So it's okay to slow the pace down. I think it's okay to ask for clarification. It's, I think you have to be able to understand what people are saying and also feel comfortable clarifying. So if you didn't hear something or you want to repeat it back to the person that you're connecting with, you absolutely should do that. This is part of the challenge with this format, and we just kind of need to lean into it a little bit better. Facial expressions. Amy talked a little bit about this, right? For the most part, in Zoom, you're seeing us, from the neck up, and so your facial expressions matter so much. And how you interact, like Amy talked about using her hands a lot. By nature, I think I'm a pretty expressive person, but I also know that I'm a fidgety person. And so I have to remember when I'm on Zoom, like, not to touch my hair or my face or put my glasses on or off, or which are just things that I do naturally. When I started doing a lot more work on Zoom, it was something that I had to remember about myself. So I think part of that is going back to the practicing with, a colleague and having them give you feedback, taping yourself. Any of those things will really help you see how your donor is experiencing you. Also, your background, it matters. you want to make sure that you are enhancing the experience and not distracting from the experience. There's lots of articles out there about your background. Think a little bit more about than you might in other experience, face-to-face visits. But I also think that you need to make sure it's not distracting, because you can't control the environment, their environment, but you can control yours. So you just don't want a lot of clutter behind you, and it'll feel better to you. And then the last thing I'm going to say right now is people are so much more forgiving right now. So if something happens, your dog walks in, the fire alarm goes off, just say you're sorry and move on. It's what's happening right now to so many people. And I have not had an experience yet where something's gone wrong, where someone has gotten angry or hung up on me. So and cut yourself some slack.
Yeah, I'm gonna move us along, and we're gonna send out these slides anyway. So if you want some more information about what happens after the visit, we're gonna do that. But since we promised you a couple role plays, we want to deliver on that promise. I also want to say one more thing. I just talked to a client this week who said, we always say face-to-face visits the best, then Zoom, then phone. And she said, you told me face-to-face visit was the best. And we did this back, depending where you live in the country, right? You still might have warm enough weather to do a backyard visit. And she said, you told me to go out and solicit face-to-face, and I did, but I was speaking with an older gentleman. We sat 13, 14 feet apart. We both had masks on. He couldn't hear me. I couldn't hear him. It was a disaster. It would have gone better over Zoom. So think about it. We're always sort of pushing like, if we can get face-to-face, let's do that. But if it's not the right scenario, then a more comfortable environment where, and she was saying, I can't see his facial expressions with a big mask on. He couldn't see mine. Sometimes Zoom is the best in this kind of an environment. Okay. So scenario number one, Jamie, set us up.
Okay. So the first thing is we're going to do a quick appointment making. I am going to be the person setting the appointment. I'm the executive director of the Oak Park Food Bank. Amy is the donor. She's made several gifts to us in the past, but she didn't contribute last year. And so what I'm trying to do here is just get her to agree to get on a call with me on Zoom. That's all I'm trying to do. By the way,
if you're just a little, if you're a tiny bit Zoom tech challenge, you can put, and you want to make the slide smaller and our faces bigger. There's a dividing line right in the middle. You just pull us over and make us bigger.
Well, why not for this? Do you want to just take the slide down for this?
All right, I'll stop sharing. Then you don't have to figure that out. Okay.
All right, and again, I'm doing this by phone. So.
Right, this is a phone getting the appointment.
Right. So Amy, I'm calling you. Pick up the phone.
Hello.
Hi, Amy. This is Jamie Klobuchar. I'm the executive director at the Oak Park Food Bank. We've met a couple of times. How are you today?
I'm okay. Thanks for calling.
How's everyone with your family, or Joshua and Adina? Are they doing well? Everybody healthy?
They're okay. We've had some COVID exposures and done a little quarantining and isolating here, but generally where things have settled down.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I'm glad things are settling down for you. And I know you started a new business. How is that going?
It's going okay. Things are picking up. I feel I'm, fingers crossed. I'm hoping that things continue to improve. We'll see what happens.
Oh, that's great. I mean, what a time to start a new business in the middle of a pandemic. I'm sure it's not quite what you envisioned when you kicked off earlier this year.
Yeah, it's always interesting and challenging. That's for sure.
Well, let me tell you why I'm calling today.
Yes.
I'm actually calling because I would love to set up an appointment with you on Zoom. You've been such a generous supporter to us over the years, and we have so much need this year. As you can imagine, with the economic downturn, we've got a lot of people coming into the food bank who need additional support and really are looking to us to keep their families well fed. And I was hoping to meet with you on Zoom to share a little bit more about what's going on at the food bank and talk about you renewing your support. Could we set something up for next week?
You know what, Jamie, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I'm not great on Zoom. I don't know WebEx from Zoom. I don't even know if I have that on my computer. To be honest, I'm doing most of my meetings via phone right now. Would it be okay if we just talked on the phone?
You know, I really would much rather see if we could get together on video. What I was hoping we could do is really take you on almost a walking tour of the food bank. I think it's been a long time since you've been in to see us, and there's so many good things going on. And I really felt like if we could see each other, which we haven't done in a really long time, and if you could, you know, get a look at what's going on kind of firsthand, I really think it would help you think about how you want to support us this year in a new way. And if it would help you at all, I mean, I would be willing to facilitate some support on the technological side.
Yeah, as long as you have someone there who can help me download this and figure it out. I just don't want to be wasting your time when we get on the call and trying to figure it out, because it's happened to me before and it's a little frustrating for me and for the person I'm trying to talk to. So if you can help me with that, I'm more than happy. I have to admit, I'm interested in seeing what you all are doing over there.
Oh, you'll be so amazed at what we're doing. Why don't I do this? Why don't I have someone from my tech team give you a call? If they can't help you on the phone, they will send someone to your home, obviously in a mask, and they can figure out how to get you set up. And once we have the technology piece worked out, I will then set the appointment with you. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. That is a good first step. I appreciate your willingness to do that.
Okay, great. I will have them send you an email to set up a time to talk, and we will go from there.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right. Have a good day, Amy.
You too.
Bye.
Goodbye. So that is, so while we get you set up on the next one, I'm going to show you the next one. If you would put in the chat right now just your feedback. What did you like about what Jamie did? What did you think she could have done better? What are your concerns about appointment making? Obviously, it doesn't always go that smoothly. I tried to put 1 or 2 roadblocks in front of her, but we're interested in your reactions right now. So if everybody could just take a minute and give us your reaction to that appointment making. Did it feel real? Did it feel too friendly and nice? We're going to move on to our solicitation role play while you do that. And then we'll take a few minutes at the end to, can everyone see this? Number 2? Okay, so we'll take a few minutes at the end to take some questions, but I want to squeeze this one in. So I'm the Director of Development at the Denver Academy for the Performing Arts, and I am meeting with Jamie via Zoom. So this is not a phone call. This is an actual Zoom solicitation. I'm asking for her for an increased gift. Jamie is an alum. She is a current parent and a former board member at the Academy. And I'm planning on showing her, and I will sort of do a little mock video on Zoom as part of our update. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share, but you know sort of where we're coming from on this one. Jamie, how are you?
I'm doing well. We're isolating over here. My daughter got exposed, so I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to have the connection today because it's lonely in here.
You know what? I can relate. I mean, given that we're performing arts high school, right? We have lots of teenagers who are dealing with the same kinds of things, and I have to tell you, we miss having you on the board of directors.
Oh, I miss it so much. It was such a good group, and it really made me feel like I just, you know, was able to stay so close to the school that I cared about so much.
Yes, and you know what? We have a fantastic board right now, but at some point, I'd love to talk to you about a committee that I have in mind for you. That's not the reason for my call today, but I would love to keep you involved because I think you have so much to offer based on what you do professionally and your personal connection as an alum to the school, and the fact that now you're a parent again in the school with your youngest being with us. And we're so really enjoying having her. She's so talented.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Thank you.
Listen, I want to tell
Oh,
you.
Amy, can you
Yeah.
hold on? I'm going to mute you for a second because I've got to get the door.
Oh, okay, sure, sure. This will happen, by the way.
Oh,
Everything
sorry
okay?
about that. Yeah, no, it's a FedEx delivery. They just kept ringing the doorbell. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. No problem at all. I know that this is a busy day for you. So I know I told you it'd only take up about 15 minutes of your time because you have a meeting coming up and I want to be conscious of that. I want to just bring you up to date and really thank you for your prior contributions. You've been a really generous, consistent $2,500 contributor, which makes you a wonderful member of our Golden Curtain Society, and we appreciate that. Because of your past support, we've been able to support a record number of families looking for financial assistance in the school this year. It's really been incredible to see how we can come to the assistance of all these families, about a third more than in years past in terms of looking for financial support. And we're looking to keep our family together, really, and to keep all of our students in the school, regardless of financial ability. So your past support has been so helpful in allowing us to do that during a really difficult time. Our head of school is anticipating that this coming year is going to be even more challenging from a financial perspective. And yet we feel very poised and ready to address these challenges. We're doing so much of our work right now virtually and remotely. We just did a week-long training for our faculty on how to deliver the kind of education, which is very unique for us, that we deliver to our students in a virtual environment. That we brought the Harvard team in to train our faculty, and they have done a phenomenal job.
Wow.
I wonder if I could just share with you for about a minute and a half a video about the work that we're doing right now. Would that be okay?
Oh, I'd love to see it.
Okay. So flash forward, we just watched the video. I'm sure you recognize some of the faces and names in there.
I did. It was really hard for me to hear pieces of that video.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It didn't come across as well. So is there, I mean, I'd like to see it, but I don't want to take up any more of your time. Is there a place I could watch it or?
Yes. Why don't I send a link to that video to you right after this meeting? And I would be happy to ensure that you're able to watch it. Let me know if it comes through clearly.
Okay. Okay.
So listen, I know that we're running short on time. I want to again thank you for your past support. I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk about what the school is facing right now, the challenges that we're facing, and we're so thrilled to have partners like you who are helping us to face those challenges. I am faced with raising, as director of development, another $100,000 this year, and so we're asking some of our key stakeholder donors if they would consider doubling their gift this year in order to help us support that goal. So what I wondered if you would consider a contribution of $5,000 toward this year's annual campaign.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that big of an ask today. I'm a little thrown off. Wow. Is there a way that I could get back to you about that? Because I feel like I need some time to think about that. I mean, at that amount, it's something I want to talk to my husband about, and I didn't see the video as well as I wanted to. So I just kind of need a little space to think about it.
Absolutely. I would love to give you as much space to think about it as you need. I'm happy to connect you with the head of school or other members of the board who are stepping up to take that really challenge their own giving, and they're thinking about their giving this year. So absolutely. Would it be okay if I followed up with you next Wednesday so that we could talk more about it? I could send you another Zoom link for the same time.
That would work. That would
Okay.
work. That would
Thank
work.
you. Listen, Jamie, I want to thank you for the time that you were able to give. And again, thank you for your support. And I really appreciate your consideration. The school's lucky to have you.
Thank you. I'll watch
Thank
the video
you.
when you send it. Okay, talk next week.
Okay.
Bye.
So in the nick of time, we finished that second solicitation. We are, listen, and by the way, put your comments about, how we did in the chat as well, because we're going to download all of them. And we'd like to be able to get back to you. We'll send you an email with, number one, the opportunity to do free coaching, 30-minute coaching with a member of our consulting team to ask your individual questions. Number two is you'll have the opportunity to share the recording of this video with anyone on your team that you'd like to watch it, assuming there's some nuggets in there that you would enjoy. And three, it'll give us an opportunity to answer some additional questions that you may have that came up in the chat. We're really hoping to continue the conversation.
And I just also want to say thank you for all these wonderful comments that I've seen in here. We will get back to you, and Amy and I are happy to have one-on-one calls with you to talk this through, because we feel for you. We feel for you having this change. So, and I'm happy to stay on for another 5 minutes if anyone wants to have a quick discussion or talk through any of these comments. And I'm sure Amy'd stay on for a couple minutes.
I'm going to stay on for as long as people want to talk. So we respect, Thank you to those of you who have to drop off and have another meeting. If you want to ask questions or make a comment and you have a few more minutes, hang out with us a little bit longer. Emily, I'm going to throw it to you to just say, can you maybe summarize some of the questions that you're getting or comments that you're seeing so that we can respond to them?
Yeah, of course. So we have gotten a couple of really great questions about talking about COVID and how organizations have pivoted in light of COVID. And is it enough to just say, yes, we did it and move on to what else you're asking for? Or do you really need to linger on that conversation?
I think it depends on the type of organization, right? I was chatting earlier on in this session today with a gentleman whose organization is really involved on the front lines of this, Seth. And for him, his work is directly linked to this. So I think that's what he needs to talk about. That's what's important to him. But I mean, what I was trying to do in my opening remarks about COVID with Amy in terms of setting the appointment was, for me, it's about establishing rapport. So I think it's really always important to try to, people come into videos or in the phone calls a little bit with development officers sometimes with their hands up, kind of like stop. And I want to get people to put their hands down, relax, and just realize I'm a person and I'm talking to you about the same things that I would talk to a friend about. So in that case, that was why I chose that. And in other times, there's other openers that I use depending on what's happening in the world around us. But Amy, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in a real solicitate, like we kind of rushed this last one. If we had had more time, my goal would have been to get the donor talking more about what motivates them, what interests them. Are they stuck on the COVID issue? Are they talking more about that? Or are they going to lead me based on their comments to talking about some other issue that's important to them? I want to follow that lead. That's why I take that time for feedback. We don't really have time to effectively portray that, but I would take the donor's lead. What are they responding to before you ask, right? That's why we set it up with the case for support. We provide them the opportunity to give feedback and to ask questions. That leads me to knowing where I want to zero in terms of my ask and additional comments. Anyone else want to jump in with a comment or a question now that we have fewer? We might be able to do that.
Yeah, do you want me to unmute? I unmuted people if we want to talk, but you can mute yourselves if you don't want to. I mean, we have so many comments. One of the comments on my appointment setting was good persistence, but would it have been better if I validated your reluctance? And I think that's absolutely a really good point. A couple of people also said that they thought pushing Zoom versus another platform was interesting. And I think that's complicated, right? Because I know that I have donors sometimes that are working in Microsoft Teams or we sometimes work in Google Meets. And so I do think that was a fault, and I did that on purpose where I really just pushed one platform. But I do think you have to be creative and realize there are other platforms out there. The mistake I made that I'm still scrolling through that I don't think anybody called me out on is I left the call with Amy and I did not have an appointment. And no one called me out on it. So even if I was having my tech person reach out to Amy, I should never have gotten off the phone with her without settling on a day and a time to meet. So, and partly that's because it is so hard to get people on the phone. And if you get someone on the phone and you miss that opportunity, Amy may have been nice as she could be with me, but she's got 5,000 things going on in her life. And so to get her back on the phone to set something up, I missed a golden opportunity right there. So don't make that mistake. I'm trying to look through this to see what other.
There were a couple of technical questions. A few people at the exact same second actually wrote in about virtual backgrounds and what you guys think of those. And also, what if your donor is reluctant to turn on their camera, or they just came from a workout and they'll talk to you anyways, but they don't want to be on video?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think people have gotten so much more casual about their appearance. I mean, for those of us who are on the fundraising side, we haven't, but I certainly have seen and heard things that I've not before in these experiences. So I think as long as you have, I mean, I would just ask, like, would you be comfortable turning on your camera and say, if you just came from a workout, I completely understand, but I'd love to connect with you. They're going to say no. And then, as Amy always says, move on.
Right. You can't convince someone to do something you don't want to do. It just really takes us to a phone call. I mean, they get to see your face and you don't get to see theirs. It's maybe better than nothing, because if you want to show a video, it still allows you to do that. Whereas if you were on a phone call, you can't, or you can't share a PowerPoint. So I think it's better than nothing. But when I'm making the appointment, I would say I really would appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you face to face. And if someone says I'm coming from a workout, I just say, you know what, I have no problem looking at you in your workout, gear or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, and I see in here that a number of people, Emily, are you seeing this too, that are working with newer prospects that they don't know well? And I wonder if everyone who has that interest would send me an email, because maybe what I could do is set up a meeting for us to just kind of talk through it as like a group coaching session. Jamie@evolvegg.com. So just send me an email and say you'd be interested in that, and I will send out a doodle and facilitate that conversation, because I think that's very, very relevant. And I do think donor qualification calls and cultivation right now is very different than solicitation in some ways. And there's a lot of good work happening out there that we can come together and problem solve around.
Is there anybody who's still on, who's done a Zoom solicitation recently, who wants to share that experience?
Ooh, Javi?
Sure. So we've been ramping up doing Zoom solicitations. My board chair and I have been piggybacking, and they're definitely a little bit awkward, but they know, again, I think it's all about setting the stage. They know that what's going to happen. So, we take them through the whole story as far as what we were confronted with, what we did, what we're looking at moving forward. Lots of time for questions, and I intentionally try to find a place that I can ask them for their feedback, or can they help us explore an area that we, need good thought partners in. And then, after sharing the general need or what we're looking at, I make the request. And I put in the chat, because someone said, wow, that was a lot to ask for double. I asked somebody who had given a multi-year gift and their gift ended. I asked basically for double that and for 5 years. And he said, wow, that's pretty significant that you just asked that of me. And I said, no, I know. And it's really, truly what we need. I certainly would not have asked you for that amount if we didn't need it right now. And he said, I need to speak to my wife. And I said, I would hope that you would speak to your wife. The two of you love, I work for Capital Camps and Retreat Center. So I said, the two of you love camp and both feel passionately about it. I want it to be something that the two of you discuss together. He called me back 30 minutes later, said, I can't do 5 years. I'm not willing to plan that far out right now. We don't know what business will look like. We're going to do 3. And they increased the amount that I asked, just by a little, but it was this acknowledgement, like there was guilt that they couldn't do the full ask that I was proposing, and they still wanted to do what they could to make a difference. And I had another one earlier this week that was also double what he had done before, and it was not a flat out no. It was another, I need to speak to my wife, and we'll see how that one comes back. I'm going to be happy if that comes back just a little bit more than previous years, but I very much agree, ask for more and ask for multiple years, because that's how we all need to plan right now.
Great.
Yeah, great example. Thanks for sharing that. And at the end of the day, if you don't ask, you don't get. If you do not ask for it, there's no way you're getting it.
Actually,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, both of them said that they respect that I asked for that amount. They, without me asking anything, both of them said it is absolutely appropriate for you to ask for that much.
Yep, that's great. Lauren, I see you've got your hand up. Do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, I can, without a lot of backstory, basically, I'm going to be talking, I think, mostly to a lot of like companies. Okay, and here's a question. If I have to leave a message, like with an assistant or a secretary, how much of this do I give? Do I say, well, I'm calling because I want to set up an appointment with them to do? So when I'm leaving a message with the assistant or somebody, the gatekeeper for somebody that I'm trying to talk to, how much of this should I give them in a message, so to speak?
Yeah, sure. I would not say I'm looking to solicit, but I would say I'm calling to talk to this person about this campaign, and I'm looking for a Zoom appointment. I mean, I think that you want to be honest about the subject of the conversation and that you're looking for a video call.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Amy, because if you leave vague messages, you rarely get a response. So I think you should just be really direct. We've got time, I think, for one more question. Stacy?
I actually just wanted to share, recently I had a series of 2 conversations with a set of grandparents. The first was just to catch up. The second, I was actually calling to talk about Life and Legacy, which is a program that many communities run. They interrupted me and said, can we just give you money now? Which was wonderful. And they gave us a gift of, they're doing Life and Legacy, but they also gave me a gift of $4,000, and they have not been donors to our school in about 4 years. Now they do help with tuition for their grandchildren, but what they specifically said is that in Canada, many people tend to be snowbirds, and because they cannot leave this winter, they are funneling us a portion of the funds that they would have spent going away. So in their being honest about that, it has actually shifted a pitch that we will do specifically to our grandparents, and we will have them lead the charge on that to remind people, if your income is steady and you're not doing the same things, perhaps you have a little extra flush to share around. So that was just an unexpected new angle and a good conversation.
Thanks for sharing.
That's great.
I need to wrap us up today, but we have all the questions that we didn't get to in the chat, and I know we actually answer all of them. So we'll go through them, and if we didn't answer them during the conversation, we'll get back to you directly. When we send out the materials, you will get a link to set up free coaching with us. And then for those of you who chatted me or emailed me about wanting to get together for another discussion, I will be in touch with a doodle link to try to find some times that work for us. And I just can't thank you enough. This was really fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.